people of different color, different language are always feared by the original population. And that's what happened to us. We were allowed to choose to go to Ontario or to a road camp in British Columbia, as I recall. At least that was a decision we made, and I think that would could be said for everybody that was on that train. We chose to go to Ontario rather than relocate to a road camp in British Columbia because that at least was a voluntary choice. We had to go somewhere. We chose where we wanted to go. I left Hastings Park and Vancouver uh, on May the 11th, 1942, and we traveled by coach uh, from Vancouver through the prairies of mid Canada, and we made stops along the way. I remember we stopped, I think it was in Edmonton, but I'm not sure whether it was Edmonton or Calgary. Then we traveled across the prairies. The next major stop was the first train stop as you get into Ontario, and that would be west of Thunder Bay. We stopped and were able to get out, stretch our legs, buy sandwiches or something to eat. We had provisions on the train, but very basic. My oldest brother and I traveled together from Vancouver. My brother's name was Cuneo, and we by chance sat with another fellow from Vancouver who seemed to be alone. His name was George Tanaka. Now, both my brother and George Tanaka were fairly active in the Japanese community in Vancouver, and George Tanaka was very active in trying to get us recognized in Ontario once we got to the larger centers. But George and my brother and I traveled sort of together, sat together on the train, and ended up at Schreiber. And from Schreiber, we were loaded into a big trailer that was pulled by a bulldozer. And that bulldozer took us from the train stop at Schreiber, took us on the into the camp that was established at Camp Black. Uh, but we arrived on the 14th of May, and there was still snow on the ground. This is May the 14th, and of course up north, snow disappears slowly. It only took us a day or so to get sort of acclimated, and we were put to work. I was chosen to work in the kitchen, being young and small, and so I worked as a kitchen help. And most, there's only so many people needed in kitchen help. All the rest were had to go work on the road, and that I would guess that within a day or two, the men were outfitted to go. Well, if they needed to be outfitted, there was a store set up in the camp. We were prisoners of location, not not uh, not by force or anything like. We were not prisoners by force, but prisoners by location. We just we were working on the road. We knew the road came from somewhere, and it was going somewhere. But aside from that, we didn't know where anywhere was. we could get into town, but you had to walk. Uh, if you wanted to go to town, I think there, if you when the tractor trailer went into town, you might hitch a ride. But I never walked into town. There were stories about bears, etc. I was not about to mess with the wildlife up in that part of the country. So I never did volunteer to go walk into town. But we were allowed to go to town um, because I remember going into town and visiting the I think it was called the Blue Lagoon Cafe, but I don't remember if that was really the name. But there was a restaurant that we went just for a change of pace from the road camp cooking and dessert, etc. We played softball. That was about the only thing we did do, play softball. And one of the men, while it was down in the sugar beet camp, did gymnastics. He built a high bar and did gymnastics. But we generally played softball. Until the war was over in 45, and we were given complete freedom in 48, I think it was. Yeah, we there were travel restrictions, things like that. But once we left the road camp and the sugar and the farm work, we were relatively free, relatively, and that would be the spring and summer of 43. We made a drive to establish a plaque, a memorial to the Japanese Canadian the camps that were established along the Trans Canada Highway. By this time, they knew us. So as far as I know, we were received very well in Schreiber when we came back in to that unveiling of what we call the Schreiber plaque. It was an experience that certainly shaped our future. It's hard to know what would have happened to the Japanese Canadians on the West Coast, considering all the discrimination that they experienced, the Japanese Canadians, as well as Chinese and East Indians experienced in British Columbia. It's hard to imagine where we would have ended up. The fact that we were forced to uh, disseminate into the rest of Canada uh, certainly changed our future, made us into the people we are today. We probably, if we had stayed in British Columbia, if we had not been dispersed, it's it's hard to believe that the Japanese Canadians, like myself, of my generation, and even the what's called the third generation. I'm the second generation. My parents were the first. I'm the second, and my children are the third. It's hard to believe that we would be where we are today if we had stayed in British Columbia and had to experience a very slow um, disappearance of the racial prejudice that existed in British Columbia. It's hard to believe that it would have that we would have had the same kind of a life if we had stayed in British Columbia under those circumstances. We were feared, we were ground under, and when we were allowed to be free, we proved to be good citizens. We proved to be good Canadians, and I think that's the lesson that the people who look on strangers as they come to Canada should remember what happened to the people who came earlier and were subjected to uh, discrimination, bad treatment, second class citizenship, uh, how they had to struggle to get to become accepted.